Well, hello, and thank you for being with us in another edition of Tu Comunidad, your community. My name is Adolfo Brusino, and I'm gonna have a very special guest today. She's Miss Takesha Red. She's Assistant City Attorney for the City of Winston-Salem. Ms. Red, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Now, we are going to, for this edition of Tu Comunidad, which means your community, in case were not aware, we're going to be talking about the Housing Justice Act. The Housing Justice Act is an ordinance that was passed, according to the document that I just read, the 21st of June this year, 2022.
That is correct.
And without further ado, let's have the expert talk about this issue. So, for those who are not aware of the Housing Justice Act, Ms. Red, what is it? How can we summarize what's about?
Okay. Well, the Housing Justice Act is a companion ordinance that was passed along with the city's affordable housing plan. As you know, affordable housing is a hot topic, and there are areas of the community where more housing units are needed and more affordable housing units are needed. And when people say affordable housing, that's a very broad term, but HUD is who actually gives us the definition of affordable housing that we must work with. And it is typically anywhere between 10 and 80% of AMI, and AMI stands for area median income, and that number is determined by HUD, and it fluctuates from time to time, and it is based on household size. So the affordable housing program for the city was a program at its inception that was designed to examine how we could retain existing housing stock and make it affordable. Or whether there were city-owned parcels of land that could be sold to individuals or companies to be developed into affordable housing units. And because there were city, or will be possibly be city funds connected to these affordable housing projects, the Housing Justice Act was an ordinance that was created, that it's an anti-poverty initiative designed to reduce homelessness and eliminate barriers to housing, such as criminal convictions, sources of income, and lack of affordability. So it's a companion piece. I was saying all of that to say it's a companion piece to the city's affordable housing program that was passed at that same June 21st council meeting.
So you mentioned two important things on this Housing Justice Act: criminal records and source of income. How will those two components will affect, or what can the citizens? How could we make them understand a little bit what are the implications of these two terms in the Housing Justice Act?
Okay, so let's say a developer purchases city land or receives city funding to rehabilitate or to develop a new property. And as a result, there are certain restrictions that come along with that money. And sources of income, okay, so sources of income, it's a way, on its face, it's just where your money comes from, right? Where your income comes from. However, if I had, let's say, an objective that I didn't want certain types or classes of people in my property, I could, on its face, say, well, I don't accept this particular type of income, and that would be a way to keep a group of people out. So if and we all know this is, against fair housing law, but let's say I wanted a property where I did not want children. Well, I could say I will not count child support as income. So let's say it's a prospective tenant works and they make $1,000 a month, and then they get $1,000 a month in child support. I'm making these numbers up. If I were to discriminate on the source of income because I didn't want children in my property, I could say, well, child support is not income. I won't count that. And if I only count the money from your job, you don't make enough money to live in this apartment complex. So what the sources of income rule says is that you cannot discriminate, or you cannot refuse to accept particular sources of income. And the list of sources that were under consideration with the time this was passed, excuse me, are things like child support, SSI, which is supplemental security income, which is different from Social Security disability income, is that SSI is a anti-poverty program. So it is the same amount every month, whereas for disabled people, whereas if I worked and were ultimately found disabled, I would receive Social Security disability income. So there are, two pieces to that. But Social Security disability income is included as well. Alimony, child support, housing choice vouchers are also known as Section 8 vouchers, because let's say I don't want to rent to Section 8 tenants. That again would be discrimination based on the source of funds. So any of the properties that are either rehabbed or developed using city funds or built on land previously owned by the city, these restrictions would be in place.
I see. How about
criminal records?
Criminal records, yes.
So, I mean, we all agree we want safe communities. Like, I don't know anyone who wants to live in a community that is not safe. However, again, if someone wanted to keep out a particular group or type or class of persons, they could say, well, anyone that's ever been convicted of any crime at any time in their life ever is not allowed to stay here. And that would be very restrictive, very, very restrictive. And it would eliminate a huge segment of the population. And so what the criminal record component of the Housing Justice Act says is that, again, for any property where the source of funds used was city money, or it was purchased on previously owned city land, or it has those restrictions, they cannot prohibit someone from becoming a tenant solely on their criminal record. And I say criminal record is conviction, and it eliminates, so like let's say I stole some potato chips and a soda from the store when I was 15. And I'm now 40 and I want to move into this apartment, and they look at my criminal record and they say, oh, well, you've got a larceny conviction from, 30 years ago. We can't accept you as a tenant. So this is the type of behavior that the Housing Justice Act is designed to prevent. So you can't use the criminal record, it's record and conviction, but it's really the conviction. You can't use it as the sole basis for denying the tenant. And the types of convictions that you can consider are assault, communicating threats, or crimes that involve the illegal use of weapons. However, this restriction is for 10 years. So let's say I did something, again, when I was 15 and I'm now 40, this landlord wouldn't be able to use that as the sole basis for denying me as a tenant because I did something and it's, past 10 years ago.
That's very interesting. So thank you, Ms. Red. So to summarize, this Housing Justice Act on money that the city gives to certain developers, certain landlords, they will not be able to use criminal records in general. There are some exceptions, right? Mm-hmm. Or sources of income to deny housing.
As the sole basis. Yes, that is correct.
Sole basis. Okay. The next question I would have here is, what landlords are covered? I mean, how do we know? I mean, imagine I was denied after I hear the show. I'm denied based on one of these categories, or I have the suspicion that I have been denied based on these categories. So what do I do? Is there going to be a list of landlords that receive this fund, so I know that this shouldn't have happened?
Possibly. So this was passed in June of this year, and now it is up to the city departments to kind of come together to create the program guidelines. So I can tell you there's not a property that's affected right now because it just passed. And so it would be for any properties that meet the criteria after June 21st of 2022. It would, I would presume that, yes, there will be a list. Now, whether it would be maintained in the community development department or whether it would be maintained in the finance department, because this is ultimately a bill that involves city funds, where that list of properties will be maintained and displayed is still in development. But yes, there will be a way for citizens to know which properties have these protections or which properties are subject to the Housing Justice Act.
So you heard it, folks. We have a new ordinance. It's called the Housing Justice Act. It is an ordinance that is aimed at that has some affordable housing component to it, as Ms. Red has explained, but also some type of enforcement component when it comes to denying houses based on, access to the house, on criminal records and of source of income. Now, is there something that you would like to add, Ms. Red, that we probably didn't touch on?
Well, I would just like to add that, as I said, these program guidelines are still being developed because it's new. And so there will be, I imagine, as the ordinance is the skeleton. And, the program guidelines, they're like the muscles, they kind of go on the bones to make the body of this ordinance and how it is to be, enforced throughout the city. And I would imagine, if individuals have questions, if they, want to give input on what they think that program should look like, they are more than welcome to email their council person or the community assistance liaison for their council person with those thoughts and comments, or and they can be passed on to the appropriate people who are kind of putting these program guidelines together. So if there are any suggestions that they would want to see as opposed to like where they think that list of affected properties should be displayed or how, then yeah, that would be something that they could suggest. And I'm sure that they're open to receiving any suggestions and feedback from the public.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Red. So you also heard it, folks, and those who are watching, thank you very much for doing so. That with the guidelines as to how exactly this ordinance is going to be applied are still being developed, correct? If you have any questions or suggestions as to what type of guidelines should be in there in this document, in this program, so we have these guidelines to apply this Housing Justice Act, you can also tell that to your council member. And with that, we will thank you very much, Ms. Red, for your time. You are Ms. Takisha Red, Assistant City Attorney for the City of Winston-Salem, and this was an episode of Tu Comunidad, Your Community, where we talk about the Housing Justice Act. Thank you very much for your time, Ms. Red.
Thank you for having me.